My name's Nancy Davidson, and I am the chair of the Issaquah Environmental Board. Welcome to the Wednesday, May 11th, 2022 Environmental Board meeting. Due to the virtual format of today's meeting, I'd like to start by providing some guidelines. We have participants attending by computer and others who may be attending by phone. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name and each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. If you are having technical issues, please try joining the meeting using a different device, such as a smartphone or tablet, or use the call-in information in the meeting invite to call into the meeting. And with that, I'm going to ask Stacy to call for attendance.
Great, thank you, Nancy. We're really excited tonight. We have a couple new members to welcome to the board, Matangi and Ashwin, and we also have two returning members that were reappointed, Don and Tom. Also just wanted to note that we're welcoming our new sustainability intern, Billy Almanza, tonight. All right, I will go ahead and do roll call. Tom Anderson. Great. Tom, do you want to test your mic again? Make sure we can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was muted. Here.
Great. Thank you. Matangi Ramanathan. Nancy Davidson.
Here.
Jamie Finch.
Here.
Cameron Fisher.
Yeah.
Rishi Hazra has an excused absence. Dan Hintz.
Here.
Laura Lebeco has an excused absence. Ashwin Manoharan.
Here.
Don McWilliams.
Here.
Ann Newcomb. And I do not see Ann on. And Janet Wall. I do not see Janet on. Great, that's it, Nancy.
So Stacy, we do have a quorum of the membership here tonight?
Yes, we do have a quorum. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to give a few guidelines to the board members, particularly since we have new board members that are joining us tonight, so that you have an understanding of how we kind of conduct the meeting along the way. If during the course of the conversation you have a desire to speak, you have a chat box on your that you can open up, and we like you to put in chat to all panelists. What you need to do is you send a chat to all panelists and either say question or comment. Please do not include your question or comment in the chat, but you will be called on by myself or the presenter to answer those questions, and you'll be acknowledged. For any commissioners that happen to have to call in on the phone, we'll intermittently check in with you to determine if you have comments. You can also press *3 to raise your hand. With that, we aren't going into public comments. We'll go to that shortly. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes, and I'm going to take these one at a time, just for due to some of my personal concerns. So the first one we want to talk about is the minutes of April 5th, 2022. Are there any comments on those minutes? If you do have comments, please put them in the chat. Well, as the chair, I'm going to point out that I do not support approving these minutes. We are a committee that is comprised of folks that are supposed to provide recommendations and comments. Primarily in talking to Stacy earlier today, I understand that you're trying to capture only what we do that has action. And we don't take action on Title 18, on the storm and surface water codes or other things. So my concern is our conversations are not getting to council, and council specifically asked us to provide recommendations or comments on documents that they've asked us to look at. So the minutes of April 5th, in my opinion, do not reflect our conversation about the transportation improvement plan. And I would like to see staff go back and make a more robust set of minutes that can be used in our at City Council to talk about what we've discussed on that. So what I'm going to ask for is a vote on this. I usually don't, but I think we should actually have a vote. Does anyone support a motion to not approve the minutes of April 5th, 2022? That's my vote. That's the action I'd like to see. Is there a second?
question, Nancy?
Sure, go ahead.
I don't see the minutes from April 5th in our packet. I see April 7th. Am I missing something?
It's right after the agenda. You don't see it in there? In the packet? Anybody
Oh, I'm
else?
sorry.
Did it?
Sorry about that. I just zipped by it too quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 2 pages.
Great. And I see that I have a second from Jamie. And so the motion is now under for consideration. And with that, Tom has asked a question. Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, thank you, Tom Anderson here. So I just wanted to clarify the sorts of content you would like to see added. Some of the other minutes, for example, have blow by blow, comment by comment from the various board members. Is that the sort of dialogue that you're hoping to have captured here that isn't there? Is that right?
That is not my intent. The second agenda item was a public hearing, so it has the blow by blow and has a recording secretary that has to do that because of the different type of meeting it was. The environmental board does not take those, does not have public hearings, so we don't have to have that kind of detail. But historically, when we've seen minutes in the past, we've had a little more detail in terms of, we asked to have this looked at. We wish this was considered and things like that. That's not included in here. And it's my understanding that, we need to get more substance to city council so they understand the concerns or the recommendations of the environmental board.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments before we take a vote? Okay. Stacy, will you call roll, please?
Yes, thanks, Nancy. I was just trying to send you a message. I had asked Tom to fill in as a regular member since we are missing a couple members tonight. Mathangi could as well, although just to note that she was not present at the April meeting, so would likely need to abstain. And maybe just a note before we move to roll call, it looks like Cameron has a comment, if you're okay taking that first.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron Fisher here. I'd like to excuse myself if I could from this vote. I wasn't present at the last meeting and I'm unaware of the meeting minutes in relation to your concern, Nancy.
Thank you, Cameron. Appreciate that.
All right, Nancy, you ready for a roll call? Or sorry, for the vote call?
Yes, please.
Okay. Tom Anderson.
Please clarify the restate.
The motion is to not approve the minutes of February 24th. Oh, sorry, I was looking at the minutes of, April 5th, 2022, and ask staff to bring back a more robust set of minutes that include more of our conversation.
I'll vote yes.
Nancy Davidson.
Yes.
Jamie Finch.
Yes.
Great. Cameron Fisher has asked to abstain. Dan Hintz.
Yeah, I think I'll abstain too. I was not present.
Thanks, Dan. Ashwin, I believe you were also not present at the April meeting. Don McWilliams.
I want to say yes, but I have to ask you, Stacy, do you have the ability to go back and give us more detailed minutes?
I think I do have the ability. Our clerks were out the last couple of days. We are going to talk tomorrow about moving forward, but I wouldn't see if that is the recommendation of the board, at least for those April 5th minutes, that I could make that edit, but we'll need to talk with the clerks about moving forward. They will also be at our June meeting, so we can have that conversation with them as well.
Okay, then I'll go yes.
So Nancy, that looks like we have 4 yeses, I believe, because of the number of abstentions.
So the motion carries at this point in time, correct? Stacy?
I believe that's correct. I would need to talk to the clerk since we have a number of abstentions.
Okay.
So
Well,
let's
this will be
count
a
that
good.
as, yeah, motion passed, and we can double check with the clerks tomorrow.
And it's challenging when you have two new members, two people that are no
Correct.
longer on the board as well. All right. Well, at this point, we will assume that the motion has carried. Now we need to consider the minutes of the April 7th, 2022 meeting. Any comments or discussion about those? Seeing none, those minutes are approved as written. Now we have the minutes of the April 13th, 2022 meeting. And I would like to make a motion that we ask the staff to go back and to further amend those minutes to better reflect the conversation that we had and bring them back to the environmental board for approval. Do I hear a second?
Yeah, I'll second that, Nancy.
Thanks, Don. Now we're open for questions or comments on that. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, Stacy, will you please take the roll?
Yeah, Nancy, it does look like we have a comment from Ashwin. Sorry, Ashwin, I'm not sure if that was from earlier or for this.
Yeah, that was from earlier.
Okay.
Is it important for this one as well? Is there something we can help you with there, Ashwin? Sorry, I missed it.
No, it's all right. I was just gonna ask to remove myself from the vote because I wasn't present.
Okay, great. Okay, will you take the roll call of the members now for those meeting minutes?
Thank you. Tom Anderson,
Yes.
Mathangi Ramanathan, I believe was absent from the meeting, or sorry, not present, not on the board yet. Nancy Davidson,
Yay.
Jamie Finch,
I wasn't present, but I watched the meeting, so I think I probably still, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Stacey, on whether?
yeah, good question.
I think you should be able to vote on it because it really is just a comment. It's not if you were at the meeting or not per se. It's about if
True.
you want more details.
Yeah, I would, yes.
Sounds great. Cameron Fisher.
Yes. More detail, please.
Okay. Dan Hintz.
Yes.
Right. Ashwin was not yet board member. Don McWilliams.
Yes, I agree.
Ashwin, yep. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 6. We have 6 in support, Nancy.
Great, so the motion to present more detailed minutes has been approved. So we're through that agenda item, and I'm sorry to make that a little difficult on everyone, but I just think it's important to give good feedback to the city council on the comment on the materials that we're working on. I'm moving on to agenda item number 3 at this point, public comments, and I'm going to provide some guidelines before we get into the public comments. Public comments are an important part of the public process. We take them seriously and factor them into the decisions we make. For members of the public joining us, welcome. If you have anyone in the meeting now who would like to make public comments, please raise your virtual hand. To do this, if you are on the phone, press *3. If you have joined by computer or smartphone, please look for a hand icon. It will vary by your device, but one option may be to go to the participant panel and select your name, then choose raise your hand. It may also be located under the reactions menu or more menu. At this point, if you are called on, if there are people that are interested, please unmute your microphone, state your name, address, and relationship to the city, such as a resident, property owner, or business owner. Please speak clearly and pause frequently. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. And when you're completed, please mute your microphone. With that, if you do not respond after your name or phone number is called on, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed. You're encouraged to rejoin the meeting when and if you are available. If that, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy and see if anybody has raised their hand to provide public comments for this meeting.
Thank you, Nancy. I will just note that we did receive 2 written comments that were passed on to the board. one on the 10th from the Seattle King County Realtors, as well as comments from Connie Marsh were sent last week on the 5th. No one has identified in advance that they wish to speak, but we do have Connie Marsh joining on the phone tonight. Connie, if you want to send me a chat, if you're unable to raise your hand, and we can move you up to panelist if you would wish to speak tonight. It looks like Connie is trying to speak. Just one moment, Connie, and I will move you up to panelist. All right, Connie, you should be able to turn on your video and unmute.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting to see if you can raise your hand. I'm Connie Marsh. I live up on Squawk Mountain, and I just wanted to pop in and say last night one of the new council subcommittees had a meeting about the garbage contract, and I really couldn't remember if the waste contract had come to this board or not, but I thought it was interesting that there was an extensive conversation about EV trucks, and how soon we would be able to get EV trucks, and that they are looking at a contract where we would have a dedicated staff person to try to reduce the waste stream, especially in the multifamily housing units. And so this would be like almost like a city employee that comes with a garbage contract expressly dedicated to reducing the waste stream, which I thought was a very good thing. So if you're interested, it's called the Mobility and Infrastructure Council Subcommittee. And I think garbage is actually a big deal, and our waste stream is a big deal. So it's going to be heading to council after a little while. So if you want to have comments on that, then you could get them in before the council actually went to a vote. And if it didn't come to this board, and I really can't remember, then it should have come to this board, because I think that that is part of the environmental responsibility. Thanks.
Thank you, Connie. And I guess I have a question. I don't recall seeing the garbage contract come to us. Does anyone else? Stacy, did we see that?
Looking back on previous agendas, I believe there was a discussion very early on, possibly before the RFP went out, but no, I don't believe the contract was brought to this board. It was something that was discussed about coming this summer to discuss the contract with the board. I just put a note out. I'll send a link to the meeting materials that Connie referenced. That includes a staff report that details out the negotiations that have occurred and agreements that have been reached regarding the transition to EV hauler trucks, as well as the dedicated waste reduction specialist.
Great, thank you. Okay. With that, have we completed? Anybody else provide an interest in providing public comment, Stacy?
We do not have any other members of the public.
Okay, at this point, the public comment section of the agenda is closed. Next, we're moving on to agenda item number 4, which are our actual agenda items. And the first item on it is board member introductions. And Stacy, I understand you're going to be leading this conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. Since we do have a couple new members of the board, we wanted just to take a couple minutes to get to know folks tonight. So we'll just ask you to share a little bit about yourself, maybe about what you do outside of your volunteer work for the city or in your professional life, a few comments about why you were interested in participating in the board, and then thought it might be nice to hear what everyone's first job was. We did this at a recent staff meeting and it was pretty entertaining. So just very briefly introduce myself for our new board members. Stacy Van McKinstry, I'm the sustainability manager at the city. I've just been here about 4 months, and as well as the board liaison. I've worked for about 15 years in environmental planning at the local scale. prior to that was working at the international scale, but I've worked on issues of wildlife conflicts, climate adaptation, salmon recovery. So very excited to be working on sustainability and climate action for the city. My first job was working actually at Kelsey Creek Farm. I got to scoop out chicken poop from the chicken coop. So it was pretty fun working there in the summers and after school. So I'll just go ahead and work down our roster. But first I will turn it over to our new sustainability intern, Billy Almanza.
Hi, everybody. My name is Billy Almanza. Currently an environmental studies major at the University of Washington. Just started doing this internship to help out Stacy with all of the planning for the leads for cities and any other programs that are coming along. As far as my first job, I think when I was 16, I worked at a fast food restaurant. And then recently I was in the Navy for a few years. So happy to be here.
Great. Thanks, Billy. Tom.
Are you talking about adult job or way back to the very beginning?
Very beginning.
Oh, well, let's see. My first paying gig, I think I was picking beans for a farm in the valley near Auburn. I think it was 13, so that was my first paying gig. Yeah, the child labor laws were more lenient back then.
Great, thanks, Tom. Can you share a little bit about what you do outside of the environmental board and what your interest was in joining this board?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I'm retired now. I'm a retired software engineer. I worked most of my career on medical devices, sort of thing, but I retired in 2018. And so volunteering for both the Issaquah History Museum and Issaquah Alps Trails Club has been a big part of my life in my reinvention of myself. But I'm Tom 2.0 now. And so these environmental causes, so trail related and conservation related activism through the Issaquah Alps Trails Club is a big thing for me these days. I'm also leading an effort to document the history of the Issaquah Alps Trails Club. So that's one of my main things that I've been working on here lately, and that's been a fun project. As far as you know, I live in Issaquah, and I'm interested in seeing Issaquah continue as a wonderful place to live, both because of the trail and amenities like that around it, but also a sustainable lifestyle here in town. And so attending to these things that we know we need to tend to of waste management, like we just were talking about, and climate action. This is what I want to help us towards so that my children and children's children can have a Issaquah to live in and enjoy as well.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Matanga, you're up next.
Hello. Thank you for welcoming to this board. I'm Matangi Ramanathan. You asked for what I've done before outside of the board. So after working 15 years at Microsoft in different roles, and prior to that I was with Oracle, I recently joined a company called Zuora, Z-U-O-R-A, and they are a subscription management software company. And I'm proud to say that we just got carbon neutrality, claimed carbon neutrality yesterday. I'm proud to be part of a new company that is, and seeing that trend of looking at the importance of environment around. I'm here to learn. I was inspired by my daughter, who started something called as iecobus.org, where she started interviewing a lot of local vendors who are providing eco-friendly products, and that's how I got interested. And in fact, I should say I was enlightened about the topics and what our community can do. So I'm definitely here to learn and contribute to further a healthy community. As far as my first job, I think I taught English to my grandmother's friends and my mother's friends when I started learning English. So, and I got paid for it as well in small money, but yet that's my first job that I remember.
Great, thank you. Welcome. Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Davidson, and I'll start with my first job. I worked at Taco Time outside of Salt Lake City. So everyone, I was one of those Taco Time kids. I am a retiree from government work. I've done public works primarily and parks. My interest has been strongly in the environment. I'm an engineer by training, but really more interested in being involved in those things. And that, I think I've answered your questions. So at this point, I'll pass it on. Thanks, Stacy.
Thanks. Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie. First job was a soccer referee, which is the coldest still I think I've ever been. Other than that, outside of the board, I work in digital product management and also volunteer as a forest steward, which actually we have an event this weekend at East Sunset Trailhead. So head out if you're interested in pulling some ivy. And then the reason I got involved was really inspired by Issaquah Alps Trails Club and the other people as part of Mountains of Sound Greenway that have preserved so much of the green space around this, around Issaquah, seeing the impact that citizens can have and hoping to be part of protecting it and continuing that legacy. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Cameron.
Oh, Cameron Fisher. First job, I think I was delivering the weekly newspaper back home in New Zealand. So when I was about 14 or thereabouts on my bike. But I've been in the US since 98 and live in Squawk Mountain. We own a couple of businesses here in Issaquah, so the preservation of the local area is quite important to my family and I. One of my businesses is an environmental consulting company. I've been working as a biologist since coming to the US for federal and private industry for that time. So that is me. Thank you.
Thanks, Cameron. Dan.
Dan Hintz. My job outside of this is managing the restoration program at the Mountains of Sound Greenway Trust. So my background is mostly in ecology, botany, horticulture, and learning more and more about salmon biology as it relates to a lot of the restoration efforts we're doing here in Issaquah and across a lot of Western Washington. So been very passionate about, I've lived in Issaquah for about 3 years, and obviously the kind of themes from a lot of people here, the connection to the natural world, trails, forests, rivers, lakes. I mean, it's pretty dang lucky and also an amazing jumping off spot for the Cascades. So, any way we can kind of continue to give back, and also definitely learning a lot from being on this board from kind of more of the hands-on work that I've done in the past. I guess my first job, I grew up outside of Chicago, so I was doing a lot of lawn mowing, raking leaves, and shoveling snow. My first job with the W-2 was working for my dad and my uncle, who owned and ran a small air compressor business in the Chicago suburbs. So that was, I guess, my first real job.
Thanks, Dan. Ashwin.
My name's Ashwin. I'm currently a junior at Skyline High School, and my first and only job was a few months ago. I worked as a basketball referee. So yeah, I just reffed 4th grade basketball. And I've always been interested in like the environment, especially ecology. I think that's what I want to do when I grow up. And so I was just looking for ways I could have like a bigger impact on both the community and the environment. And I thought that the environmental board was a great way to do both of those things.
Great. Thanks, Ashwin. Basketball ref sounds a little warmer than Jamie's outdoor soccer ref experience. Don. Oh, Don, you are on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're a little quiet.
Sorry, it took a second to register there. My first job was at Johnny's Super Deli in Totem Lake for $3.50 an hour washing dishes. My professional career, I work in stormwater management and water quality for a local municipality. And why I joined the environmental board is I've lived around here all my life. I've enjoyed the trails, the mountains, everything that the Northwest has to offer, and just want to give back to the community a little bit.
Great, thanks, Don. All right, Nancy, the one item I just wanted to check in with the board about before we move on to the next agenda item was about developing a roster with contact information so we could share that across the board. Just maybe see a thumbs up if folks are comfortable providing contact information to other board members. All right, seeing head nods and thumbs. I'll reach out to folks just to get confirmation, make sure everyone's comfortable with that, but appreciate it. All right, Nancy, I'll hand it back to you for our next item.
Thank you, everybody, particularly Stacy, and it was fun to hear about all of your past careers. We're moving on to the next agenda item, and the next one is the board chair and vice chair elections. And I'm fortunate that Stacy provided me with the script so I know how to do this since I get to conduct it. So here I will be following the script. So the following process will be used to elect officers. First, I will call for nominations. When all nominations have been made, I will close the nominations. If only one nomination is made, the member is considered elected to the position by unanimous consent. If we have multiple nominations, board members are provided an opportunity to discuss the nominees. I will then ask the board members to cast votes on the nominees in the order they were nominated by a roll call vote. Board members may vote only for one nominee per office and may vote for themselves. The board member receiving the majority of the votes is declared the chair or the vice chair, as that may be. Are there any questions about the process at this point before I open it up for nominations? Seeing none. The first one we're going to open up is I am looking for nominations for chair.
I nominate Jamie.
Thank you, Don. We have a nomination of Jamie Finch for the chair. Are there any other nominations to be considered? Seeing none, congratulations, Jamie. I understand in June you'll be taking over as the chair of this. Thank you for stepping up. Now I'm moving on to the position of vice chair. Are there any nominations for the position of vice chair? Go ahead, Jamie.
I'd like to nominate Don McWilliams.
Don McWilliams has been nominated. Are there any other nominations for the position of vice chair? Seeing none, congratulations, Don. You're now the vice chair starting in June of the Environmental Board. Thank you all. Thank you both to Jamie and Don for stepping up. Nice job, and I look forward to seeing where you take the board next. Thank you very much. And with that, that agenda item has concluded, and we'll move on to item C of that, floodplain and stormwater code update. And Evan, I believe you're on for that one. Thank you.
All right, can you see the presentation?
We are seeing your WebEx screen right now. So it looks like you just need to switch your screen.
All right, just a sec here. How about now?
Yes.
All right. So good evening, and thanks for having us back here to talk tonight about stormwater and floodplain code update process. My name is Evan Brumfield, and I'm an environmental and regulatory program administrator here for the city. We're coming back to you tonight to close the loop on the feedback that we received at the last meeting with the Environmental Board and how that feedback was used in the council study session on April 12th. We'll also be talking about our stormwater design manual update and areas that we have again identified to go potentially above and beyond to better protect Issaquah's environment and surface waters. So how do we get here? Kicked off by an internal staff meeting in October. Staff met with consultants to identify areas of mandatory updates as well as areas that we can go above and beyond these basic mandatory requirements. We then came to the joint environmental board PPC committee meeting on March 9th to present on the areas we could go above and beyond these basic mandatory updates to accommodate for climate change. Those included future floodplain protections and critical drainage review. We then presented the options based on feedback we received from the Environmental Board and PBC to a council study session on April 12th. And then after that study session, we sent out draft codes for internal review based on recommendations received from both council and the Environmental Board and PPC. So tonight we're here to discuss the process, the update process and stormwater design manual. After tonight, code will be finalized and SEPA will be submitted. And so then based on the feedback we receive, we will be presenting the final code and stormwater design manual updates at the June 7th Mobility Infrastructure Committee meeting, with then hopeful June 21st council meeting approval to meet our June 30th adoption deadline to update our stormwater design manual. So on March 9th, we presented on the areas where we can go above and beyond these basic requirements to the Environmental Board and Planning Policy Commission. In general, both the EB and the PPC supported the direction staff have taken with the areas identified for climate change accommodation. One area from that meeting that we requested more direction on from council is single-family residential flood level protections. These comments were to keep single-family residential in the base flood elevation, or BFE +1 flood protection level, instead of increasing protections to the BFE +2 level. The desire for this was due to the costs associated with the increased protections and visual impacts of the elevated structures. So let's talk about costs. From past grant applications the city has completed for elevating homes for flood protection, we have a ballpark estimate of approximately $30,000 for every foot raised on an existing single-family residential house. So the cost would be approximately $30,000 to increase protection by 1 foot to the BFE +2 level. New construction would most likely be significantly cheaper, as the additional foot of protection to get to BFE +2 would mainly be in material costs for the foundation, plumbing, and electrical. You wouldn't have to raise an existing house to then do all that kind of stuff. So let's talk about flood insurance claims. The last major flood we have all insurance claim information on is from 2009. And it's important to note that these following dollar figures are going to be in 2009 dollars. So there were 9 claims for an average claim of $83,000, with the highest claim being $446,000 and the lowest being $13,000. So with the rise in all costs and property values, especially since 2009, it is certain that the cost of claims to increase as well. So
Evan, I just have a quick, do you want questions along the way, or do you want to wait until you're completed with your presentation?
Sure, questions along the way are fine.
So I have a question when you're talking, just a quick question. When you're talking about these claims, are they for single family homes or are they for commercial buildings when you're talking 443 versus the other one?
Yes, yeah, we have, they are for both commercial and single family. And I have that broken down that I can give it to you as well.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So
hold on, I've got one more question. Jamie had a question before you keep going. Go ahead, Jamie. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Thanks, Nancy. Jamie speaking. Evan, do you mind just giving us a little refresher on exactly where the BFE versus the floodplain year, where those are applicable? That was something I just wanted to make sure I was clear on for this conversation.
Yeah, so all of the floodplain standards will be applied to the existing 100-year floodplain footprint. There's no expansion of applicability of flood standards. The only thing that's changing is the increased level of protections within that 100-year floodplain.
I think my question might have been a bit different. I just recall that where we had a defined 500-year floodplain was where the 500-year floodplain would be used. In areas where it wasn't, we didn't have detailed mapping, it would be based on the BFE +2. Is that correct, or am I off base on that? And it's BFE +2 everywhere.
So it is not BFE +2 everywhere. So there's all of our mapped floodplain in Issaquah. If we have it mapped, so if we know the elevation of the flood, the 100-year floodplain, then we would be BFE +2. But in areas where we do not know that, like it's unknown, then we would do it wouldn't be a BFE +2 because the BFE isn't known. It would be based on the ground elevation. But we have our consultant Paul Fent here who can speak to that too better if you would like that.
Since we have 2 new board members, Evan, just explain the maps of the floodplain and, kind of what those are and what the 1 and 2 mean. Just make sure that everybody kind of understands what we're talking about because they weren't here for the previous conversation.
Okay. So in Issaquah, we have mapped floodplain. And so in these areas, they are areas that have a higher likelihood of flooding, basically when we get elevated flows. And in Issaquah, when we speak to the base flood elevation or BFE, we are talking about our 100-year flood level. And that 100-year flood level is not necessarily a flood that happens every 100 years. It is essentially a flood that has a 1% chance of happening every year. I believe that's the way it is. So what we are proposing, or what we proposed, was to use future climate data information to accommodate for climate change to increase our current standards are base flood elevation +1, and that +1 is it's a foot of freeboard that it's a protection level for flood protection. And so what we are doing is increasing that +1 to a +2 to accommodate for future climate change. Did I explain that correctly? Do we get that?
Well, I understood you, but I was here for the last presentation. I guess we should ask the people that weren't here for the last presentation. Ashwin, how did he do? Do you understand it? I guess that would be the question.
Yeah, it makes sense. So the areas that are more exposed to being damaged by floods are raised to a higher level. Is that it?
Yes, that's correct. Our current standard has them already elevated, and what we're proposing to accommodate for climate change is another foot of additional protection.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
You're muted, Nancy.
Sorry, Mathanga, you okay if we continue on before we get into our conversation? Any other questions?
I had a question. Do you want me to ask that or?
Sure, I see you're up there with a question. Go ahead. I think this might be a good time for you to ask it.
The BFE +2 level that you talk about, has that been implemented anywhere else within the county or outside the county to look at the effectiveness?
King County has a basically the standard is base flood elevation +1. That's to meet the National Flood Insurance Program. And King County has elected to go higher than that to a BFE +2 and then also +3 in some areas as well.
Okay, Evan, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you, but at least we're now a little more level on the playing field here. Thank you.
That's good. So in general, the majority of Issaquah's regulated floodplain is made up of single-family residential. The cost of elevating a single-family residential home is negligible compared to the cost savings of being impacted by a flood. So with the Environmental Board and Planning Policy Committee input, we brought the same topics to the council study session. Now we realized that we needed more information as to why it was important to increase these protections from single-family residential to that BFE +2 level. So we brought the comment to council study session based on feedback we received from the joint meeting, and then with additional information on the costs that I presented on in the previous slide. So we presented 2 recommendations to council. One being the acceptance of all the areas included in the staff report that went above and beyond these basic requirements to accommodate for climate change. And that included the future flood protections and the critical drainage review. So in general, council unanimously supported recommendations from the administration to accommodate for these above and beyond climate change. So now let's talk about the mandatory stormwater updates. The MPDS permit requires us to update our stormwater design manual by June 30th of this year. The intent of the stormwater design manual is to match requirements with the phase 2 MPDS stormwater permit. So just to give, would you like me to talk about the MPDS permit as well?
Well, I had
a lot of acronyms. Yeah.
I know you are. I agree with that. So I have one quick question before you go there. Can I go back to the previous topic? Just one quick question. And that is, you talk about a critical drainage review, and the question we had for you is how much is that going to cost for a single family home or a commercial building? And I don't know if we ever saw that answer. You may have given it to council. Could you perhaps discuss that?
I'm going to phone a friend here, and Paul, can you unmute and answer that question?
Yeah, I think that remembering the question was, are the capabilities there, and then generally what would it do, or what the effects and the costs and so on. And the capabilities are there. Most consultants that are doing this type of work or development work and so on could do that work. The way the critical drainage review is set up is it's basically a tiered process where, depending on the level of the type of development and the complexity of it and the potential for it to flood, those things will increase over the conditions or the circumstances of the individual application. So it's hard to pin down exactly what it would be. The most of the work that's would be done in critical drainage review is part of the background work that an engineer would do anyway in preparing a plan for a design of a project, understanding what runoff is coming into sites and what's leaving the sites and so on. And it would just be one piece of additional documentation of indicating either there's not a high potential or there is a low potential that there would be an adverse effect from a drainage failure or from a storm that's bigger than the design storm. And the greater the risk that occurs as far as additional flooding that could occur from the development, the more that the applicant would have to evaluate. One of the main changes that's going to occur in the adoption is what's called the offsite drainage analysis. So the terms will change from the critical drainage review to that. That right now is an optional requirement in the manual, but it follows all the same things that we talked about before in the critical drainage review. And the main thing that it adds is responsibility to develop mitigations in the event that there is a potential failure. And so that's where the additional cost of the review would occur. And again, it would be a range of costs relative to the potential impacts. We're talking about potential of thousands of dollars, of a few $1,000s for adding that to a thing, not tens of thousands, or certainly more than that. It's mainly because it's part of the original. Most of the background information goes into it as part of the original work that the applicants are doing when they're evaluating their sites anyway.
So what you're saying is that this is probably less than $10,000 for almost all applications in the city, because we did get that question or that comment from, what was it, the Realtors Association, in a letter that came to us. And so that's why I'm asking the question to follow on is, we're talking less than 10,000 for commercial and residential properties?
It's that if our firm doesn't exactly do that work for developers, so I don't know what the usual market is on doing that. As far as understanding what that work is we evaluate and review it, and I can make an estimate on the number of hours it would take me to do it based on what I think it's doing, and it would be certainly less than 40 hours on most cases, other than the very extreme cases, and at the normal kind of median rates that we would have for an engineering consultant, that it would be less than 10,000.
Okay, thank you. I see we have another question from Jamie. Jamie, please go ahead.
Thanks, Nancy. Jamie speaking. And I don't know if Paul or Evan, you'd be better positioned to answer this. the maps that we have that are basically defining the BFEs, how often are those updated? Is there a regular cadence, or is it kind of one-off? How does that work?
Yeah, they're updated periodically by FEMA, and then we're required to adopt them as soon as they're updated. So we just updated our maps in 2019 or 2020. We just updated 2020 was the last time we updated. And before that, it was in the maybe 2010 or something like that. But they're looking to go more frequently than 10 years. And really, the update,
less, it sounds
yeah,
like.
yeah, the update should have happened. They had all the information in like 2015, but it just took 5 years for it to finally become live. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Great. I think that's all of our questions, and I just have one other request for the presenters, and that is to try and minimize the acronyms and try and say the whole words, because I think not all of us are in the business. Thank you very much.
So our stormwater design manual is made up of 2 separate documents. We have our Department of Ecology 2019 Stormwater Management Manual of Western Washington, which we also call our Ecology Manual. And we have the 2022 Stormwater Design Manual Addendum. What this addendum does is it allows us to be more locally prescriptive of the 2019 Ecology Manual to fit Issaquah better. So as previously stated, and maybe I didn't because I got off track, but the city will be updating our current 2014 Ecology Manual to the most current 2019 Ecology Manual. So the Ecology Manual provides guidance on the measures necessary to control the quantity and quality of stormwater. Issaquah uses this manual to set stormwater requirements for new development and redevelopment projects. Land developers and development engineers use this manual to design permanent stormwater control plans, create construction stormwater pollution prevention plans, and determine stormwater infrastructure. Businesses use this manual to help design their stormwater pollution prevention plans. The 2019 manual update will continue to help Issaquah comply with these permits. The 2019 Ecology Manual changes include increased alignment with permitting and performance standards, clarifications and inclusions of additional source control BMPs, additional modeling requirements, and other considerations.
Just a quick question, and a BMP is?
Thank you. Best management practice. So the addendum allows us to be more locally prescriptive of the 2019 Ecology Manual to fit Issaquah better. While most of ecologies of the 2019 Ecology Manual is applicable to the city of Issaquah, several significant differences are contained in the 2022 Stormwater Design Manual Addendum and through other city requirements for development permitting, including the Central Issaquah Area Alternative Flow Control Standard, the Central Issaquah Area Seasonally Saturated Soil Assumption. The turbidity standard of 100 NTUs is the discharge notification level for all projects in the city at all times up to the 10-year storm. So NTUs is a measure of basically how cloudy water is. It is a measuring unit. Larger projects that require their own construction stormwater permit through ecology have a discharge notification level of 250 NTUs. So Issaquah has decided in previous updates to be more proactive and restrictive on stormwater discharging from a construction site, and these larger projects are required to meet our more restrictive standard. We also have our CPD department, our Community Planning and Development, that conducts all our stormwater review. And then number 5 is the inclusion now of our critical drainage review, which is going to be including this offsite analysis in the manual, which will be an assessment of consequences and risks of stormwater system failures. Let's see a question coming up.
Yes, it appears Dan has a question for you. Dan, please go ahead.
Thanks, Nancy. Dan speaking. Evan, can you just explain a little bit more? Number 1 and 2, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding, and I know there's a little more detail in the memo on existing land use to be assumed to the pre-developed condition. Can you just kind of parse that out a little bit for those first two and what the impacts are?
Yeah, so the alternative flow control standard modifies the flow control standard in the valley floor area of downtown Issaquah. So in these subbasins, the pre-developed condition can be assumed to be the existing site conditions instead of forested, like other areas of town.
Okay.
And
sorry.
Yeah, the seasonally saturated soil assumption. So in 2011, the city conducted a technical analysis in coordination with the Department of Ecology into the pre-developed hydrology of the area, and specifically where seasonally saturated soil conditions can be documented near the surface and be assumed. Does that answer your question?
No, that's very helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
And Evan, we have another question here. Don McWilliams had one. Go ahead, Don, please.
Hi, Evan. Don here. On number 1, your alternative flow control standard for the valley floor there, is that using the 60-40 assumption? Where are you guys getting that from?
I will be phoning a friend here. We have our stormwater reviewer on the phone, Stacy. Do you have the answer to that?
Yeah, this is Stacy Rush. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this alternative flow control standard was not based on the 60-40. It was something that Issaquah presented to ecology back in 2016, I think it was. So it's already in place. It's not a new requirement. And it looked at the valley floor and said, well, this area is, typically has seasonally saturated soils, and the runoff is piped directly to Lake Washington. It's all piped all the way from that area to Lake Sammamish. Sorry, not Lake Washington. So doing flow control, typically you kind of want flow control like if you're going to streams and things for protection. But in this area, Issaquah made the case that it wasn't really needed and it wouldn't really help stormwater standards to do that. And ecology agreed and approved it back in 2016.
Okay, but it still has water quality involved in it?
Yes, that area is only for flow control. Water quality is still required in that area. And that was kind of a misunderstanding in our current addendum that we've been using, that it wasn't spelled out very clearly, but I've been trying to make it clear when I do reviews. But yeah, definitely, they still have to do water quality treatment, just not flow control.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Well, I guess I have a follow-on question to that. I guess I'm surprised to hear we don't need flow control in the valley floor. And the reason I say that is because it's receiving a lot of runoff from Issaquah Tiger Mountains, and there are many creeks in the area, many of which flood. Why would flood control not be important in the central Issaquah area? I mean, is that the right thing to do is what I'm asking? Is that really the standard that we want to hold this community to, given the amount of land that is contributing to Issaquah Creek and its various tributaries?
I was not part of that made this recommendation to ecology. So I'm not exactly sure how to answer your question.
Yeah, that's something that we'll have to run up the flagpole and talk with and get back to you, get an answer on for sure.
Hey, Evan, so this is Alan Quinn. I could quickly chime in. It's okay. So I guess they're still providing flow control. We're just not. It's not to the pre-forested, forested condition is pre-developed forested, right? It's existing site, so they still have to do flow control. It's not. So we're not doing the what they call the duration standard, matching standard to forested conditions, which is what happened yeah. So
I guess I'm trying to understand. So what I'm hearing you say, Alan, just to make sure I understand it, is that the standard for central Issaquah area is different than other areas, but it still is required to do some level of flow control.
That's correct. And yeah, so that analysis was done, like I said, as Stacy had mentioned, we weren't involved in that. I believe it was NHC was a consultant that did the work for the city, and they weren't using, I think it's the 80-20 rule, but in any case, yeah, they didn't look at land use back at whatever that date was. They did this other analysis and looked at the hydrology, geomorphology of the streams, and conclude, and like Stacy had said, if it's an all pipe system, then it doesn't make any sense to do a pre-forested duration standard because there's no erodible channels. It's all pipe or ditch. So that's why that area is not, doesn't have to follow that the pre-developed condition or forested condition. So it's really the areas outside of those, up in the hillsides where you have erodible channels that can be eroded with high velocity flows.
I guess I'm going to keep pushing a little bit on this one because I'm having a hard time buying that there's not erodible areas in the central Issaquah area. Okay. So, and my only interest is to do the right thing. And I really want to protect the creeks and streams in this community. It's really important to me. That's probably why I'm on here. So I'm really concerned that the standard we're putting in central Issaquah area is maybe too loose compared to what we might be expecting elsewhere. And that's why I'm asking the questions I'm asking, because I think if we're doing these addendums, I'm questioning if we're doing the right thing for the community.
Yeah,
Well,
noted. And we'll have to come back to you on that. We can't make the decision here tonight.
All right, thanks.
So we can look at it more. And also, I just want to point out the seasonally saturated soils assumption. It's not just a blanket adjustment. Projects have to provide geotechnical analysis that confirms that the soils are seasonally saturated. And yeah, I'm not sure what else to say. That's a big, long report done by NHC.
Yeah, we'll look at that. We can, Stacey and I will review it and get back to you.
It also, part of it, they do need to provide flow control, as Alan was making the difference. They don't have to go back to forested conditions. They are allowed to use existing, and a lot of the valley floor is already developed with existing impervious surface areas. So that's why a lot of projects do not trigger any additional flow control, because they're not because you don't have to do it right now under our current standards. If you're adding less than 10,000 square feet new impervious or replacing, you don't have to provide flow control. So a lot of the parcels, they already have existing impervious, and they're going to add less than 10,000 square feet. So they will not be providing any flow control.
Well, I guess just to kind of finalize my perspective on this, and then I understand you'll get back to us. I can look at Costco and those great big buildings going in there, some of which weren't there before. And they're right next to Issaquah Creek, and I'm hoping they're providing flow control. So and I'm envisioning that Target and others, I look at Redmond and Bellevue and what's going on with their central areas. I know we're not going as big as those, but there's a lot of potential there. So that is my concern.
And then Costco is not in the flow control exempt or the flow control alternative flow control area. It's very specific outlined map for that area. And yes, Costco used those existing ponds, and they did provide detention and water quality treatment prior to Issaquah Creek.
Okay. Well, that's just giving you that as an example. That was my comment. Thank you.
I guess, Evan, I have one question for you to follow up with that, hearing Nancy's comments and recognizing her concerns. So in the central Issaquah area, is the majority of the stormwater directly piped to the lake, or is it going through the stream, more so on new construction so redevelopment rather than existing?
Yeah, and I'll have to phone a friend again here. Stacy, do you?
Wait, what was the specific? I'm sorry, what was the specific question?
So you're not requiring flow control in the central Issaquah area. You're using existing standards, and yeah, I get that. I know the regulations, but is the majority of the stormwater go straight to the lake, or does it go through Issaquah Creek on its way there? So where do the outfalls?
No, it goes straight to the lake.
Okay.
It's piped. That was what the study showed, that it went directly to, it was piped entirely to Lake Sammamish.
So that minimizes the impacts on Issaquah Creek.
Yes. And I think we could prepare kind of maybe a summary, because maybe some of you don't want to read the entire thick report that was prepared by it, but we could attach that too and send it to you.
I think a high level summary would be nice.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, bear in mind that it had to go through ecology review,
which
and
is
approval.
substantial.
So, yeah, so I think it's, like I said, it was done before Julie and Evan and I were here, but it was a rigorous review by ecology, and like I said, NHC did the work. So, but we'll dig it up and get back to you on it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And then we'll also, so to get back here to number 6, we're also going to be adopting certain sections from the King County Surface Water Design Manual, which is an equivalent manual to the Ecology Manual. And we're doing this in 2 separate areas. With Chapter 4, the Conveyance System Analysis and Design, and that's mainly due to, in general, the 2019 Ecology Manual doesn't really address conveyance, meaning it doesn't have minimum requirements for conveyance of stormwater. The Ecology Manual leaves it up to local jurisdictions to have specifics on how stormwater is to be conveyed. And so what we've been doing, this is, again, something that we've already been doing over the last 5-6 years, but now we want to put it into our addendum. So what we've been doing is sending applicants to the King County Surface Water Design Manual to be able to design their conveyance. And so we're going to continue to do, our stormwater reviewers are going to continue to do this, but we are just adding it into our addendum and to be more transparent in our requirements. Then we're also adopting the isopluvial map, which is used to determine the 10-year storm precipitation levels in Issaquah. This year, or this update in Ecology Manual, they actually do have isopluvial maps, but they are not as locally specific as the King County Manual. So we want to use they're more user-friendly.
Evan, for those that don't know, would you explain what an isopluvial map is?
It basically is a map that has gradient lines going across it that show precipitation levels that determine a certain storm level. Did that describe it enough? I don't know what the term isopluvial, I can't define that off the top of my head.
No, I think you did pretty good. It determines the 10-year, 20-year, 50-year, 100-year storm precipitation amounts.
So further in our addendum here, while we were updating we came across a couple areas where we thought again that we could do more to protect Issaquah's environment and surface waters. One of these areas is in the project thresholds that trigger stormwater minimum requirements during redevelopment. So when I mention minimum requirements, it's kind of like the bread and butter of stormwater requirements. There's 9 separate minimum requirements, ones that are notable that you would most likely know are minimum requirement 5, which is LID or low impact development, minimum requirement 6, which is runoff treatment and water quality, and minimum requirement 7, which is flow control. So, or like how you detain your stormwater on your site. So in 3A in this table, for redevelopment, if a project is redeveloping and the value of the improvements is less than 50% of the total site assessed value, then that project would need to only account for the new hard surfaces added as a part of that project. So new hard surfaces are defined as a surface that is changed from a pervious surface to an impervious surface. So a pervious, so the example I give is, if we have a big grass open field that now someone has come on board, permitted, and paved it into a parking lot, that is a change from a pervious surface to now an impervious surface, and now would be a new hard surface.
I have a question for you on that, Evan. If that's okay.
Yeah.
So suppose someone comes in and puts a green roof on it and still does that, so that it's kind of a trade-off thing. Is that how will that affect it? Are you following what I'm thinking? So
yes, I know what you're saying. Yes. Yeah. And I would. That's again a stormwater reviewer. Stacy, turn the camera on. Stacy.
Yeah. Green roofs are treated, but per the manual, you can count those as 50% impervious and 50% pervious. So they're kind of a 50-50 thing. It doesn't give you, it doesn't count it as 100% pervious, but at least, but it does take into account some infiltration, some retention of rain.
So if I'm redeveloping, I'm going to pick on Target again because it seems to be my commercial building of choice. And they come in and they're redeveloping and putting a green roof on and want to pave more areas somewhere else. I don't know where that would be, but let's just pretend there is some place. Can they use that as a trade-off to avoid hitting this trigger?
No. To hit the threshold, which is what the 2,000, the 5,000, the 10,000 square feet, those are thresholds, and they have to look at the site as a whole of what they're doing. Like if they're adding a building, doesn't matter what the roof type is, but it's a hard surface. How they would show how they're meeting flow control, that's when they can take the credit. They can't take a credit to stay below a threshold. But they can use it to show how they're mitigating for that impervious area.
So I assume the language says that in some way, shape, or form in the code or whatever.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think that's one of the questions that we've brought up to clarify better in the addendum, because I know since I've been reviewing private projects under the current addendum, that question came up a lot, and it was like, nice try, but no, you have to meet the thresholds, you got to go by the actual hard surface you're adding, and then you can use that to show how you're mitigating, but it doesn't reduce the threshold.
Thank you very much.
Nancy, we have a question from Jamie.
Sorry, I missed it. Thanks. Go ahead, Jamie.
Thanks, Nancy. Jamie speaking. I just had a clarifying question. I'm a little bit confused by number 1. I would expect, as opposed to or, that to be and, because it would seem like to be in that level, it could need, like, the level above it is either one of those being thresholds met. Should that one say and? Am I thinking about that correctly? Or what am I missing?
Do you want me to answer that, Evan, or do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Stacy.
What it's looking at is because some projects will have some square footage of land disturbance, but maybe they're not adding any hard surface. So that's what that or is trying, the intent is to capture that. The first one is if you're replacing hard surface, but if the other one, you might still be disturbing a bunch of land, but you're not adding or replacing hard surface, but those still could create an erosion control problem too. So it's for 2 types of projects.
But I think that's consistent with what I was saying, is that, and maybe I'm missing it, but it just seems like in the example you just mentioned, if someone hasn't, the way I read this, if someone hasn't met both of those thresholds, they would be like, say they haven't disturbed any, they're not adding any hard surfaces, but they've added 8,000 square feet of land disturbance. It's a little bit unclear in my reading of this chart on where they would fall.
Okay. Yeah, the intention, that maybe we need to clarify this or something in the chart. The intention was that if you're meeting one of those, that's why there's an or and not a, you don't have to meet both, but if you're meeting at least one of those, then the TSE is required. So
yeah, I think most
we can, Evan, maybe we can work on how to and Alan, we can work on how to clarify this.
So this is an internal table that we've made to put in our addendum. There's flow charts that are in the ecology manual that say all the same stuff, but they are very confusing to follow. And so this was made in 2016 as an attempt to make it more easily digestible to the average person. So.
And we've been kind of going back and forth on whether to keep this table in the new one or to remove it and just have the flow charts.
Yeah.
So maybe
yeah, it's a good thing that we can look at, Jamie. Thank you for that. And yeah, we definitely want it to be as clear as possible. So that makes Stacy's job easier.
If this table's not clear, we don't want it to stay as it is in the addendum. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So getting back here, so on 3A, we're talking about the redevelopment, and if it's below that 50%, 50% threshold, they only have to account for the new hard surfaces in their minimum requirements. If we compare that with 3B here in redevelopment, these are for projects redeveloping that the value of the improvements is more than 50% of the total assessed value. Then this project would need to account for both new and replaced hard surfaces as part of this project. So a replaced hard surface would be, Nancy, you gave the example of, you know, building a building over a parking lot, that kind of thing. So you would be, for a definition for structures, it would be the removal and replacement of impervious surfaces down to the foundation. And for other impervious surfaces like a parking lot, it would be the removal down to bare soil or base course or replacement. So the example I give for this always is, you know, we're driving into the Target parking lot and we see cracks in the parking lot. You know, it kind of looks like the alligator back. It's called alligatoring. So the remedy for that is you remove that broken concrete up, you fix the subgrade below, which is the gravel, and then you repave it. So you are replacing that hard surface that was broken up with new impervious surface. So that is a replaced hard surface. So the question we have that we really want more guidance on is, should we be treating all redevelopment the same? So why would we want to consider this? So a significant amount of redevelopment projects are currently only accounting for new hard surfaces, missing out on potential stormwater flow control and water quality treatment of existing pollution generating hard surfaces, further protecting our environment and accounting for past development. So that's something we would like some more discussion on. Another, Jamie, go ahead.
Thanks, Evan. Just a quick question on that. So I just want, taking your example, so say I have a lot and it's got a certain amount of hard surfaces or impervious surfaces currently. Basically what you're asking us is, should, like, let's say I want to add a bunch of, I don't know, a bunch of concrete, big area of concrete. You're asking, should not only, is it only the replaced? So even if I wasn't, like, I have a bunch of impervious surfaces, I'm not touching them currently, I'm just adding all these other paved areas. Is that still, it's just those new paved areas that would be considered?
Yes, if you were.
Even with the update, I guess, sorry. Even with the update.
Yeah, if you were below that 50% threshold. So let's say this parcel that you own is worth $1 million and this concrete work that you're doing is $400,000. So you're staying below that 50% threshold, then yes, only the new hard surfaces that you're adding would have to be accounted for in stormwater management, in the stormwater requirements. So that new concrete that you would be putting in, not the existing impervious surface on the site. So the question is, if someone is doing that, should we be accounting for the existing impervious that's already on the site plus that concrete work that is being done? That if that concrete work was above that 50% threshold, so $501,000, then they would have to account for both the new and replaced, if they replaced anything. But yeah.
So taking my example, if instead of just paving the new, I also had some damaged portions of the existing and I was trying to do those up at the same time, and then that cost $150,000, I could end up triggering, because I would end up $550K. Yes. So over half. Okay.
And I had another question that goes with this as well, Evan.
Yeah.
And you just triggered a couple of them. Another one on top of it. The first one would be, is there a time frame? Like, could you do one year and one the next year based on the conversation you and Jamie just had? And would that trigger it? Is there a time frame between improvements?
Stacy. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point, and that's what kind of we see happening in development. They'll do something 1 year, maybe wait a few years, do another section another year, and that there isn't really any clear language that says they can't do that. It's like it's a new project each time, but I don't think that's Ecology's intent, is for them to do something a little bit, every few years. The intent was to look at it all, but we do not have clear, because I've seen that happen, and I'm looking at the codes and it's like, I'm not finding a clear code that says they have to, they can't just do the incremental. So if that's something that we want to prevent, we would need to be clear on that in the addendum.
Okay. Well, this adds a comment to it. I think that's something we should be clear about in the addendum. That would be my comment to you. And define what the terms is, it's considered the same project if it happens, if improvements are made every year over a period of time. The second question I had that goes with it, right down here on Second and Sunset, there is a house or a fairly large structure that was torn down and it's now become a vacant lot. I suspect it will end up being some kind of commercial building, not sure where it's at in the cities. So now that they've taken that structure down, it's probably been down for 2 years because of COVID, and they're probably getting financing and permits. But they had a big building on it 2 years ago. Where did they fit in this whole thing?
I am not sure. I guess we would look at it and say, okay, you're adding, well, if they've already taken the building down, that means it's going to be all, any impervious they add is going to be all new and replaced. But you're saying they put a parking lot in
the 2 years ago, they had a great big structure sitting there.
Right, so and now you're saying it's all, but now you're saying it's a parking lot now, or it's?
No, it's green grass. It's grass.
Ah.
And it's been like that for, I think that's something that needs to be clarified because people will get creative.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, they do. And I see those and it frustrates me when I don't have something to back up, because I think, yeah, they would say, hey, it's green grass right now. And we'd be like, But it would still, even if it's going to be, even if it would count as, if we accounted for the existing structure there and they counted as replaced, that's why they have to do flow control and water quality treatment for new and replaced. So we could call it replaced and not new, and they still would have to do requirements.
I just hope that we can get clarity in this for structure, for opportunities like this.
Certainly.
Request.
I'm adding a note now.
Thank you. That's all my questions and comments.
Anybody else before I change the slide? All right. So another item we're bringing up to you is for discussion is on enhanced treatment. So currently in the ecology manual, enhanced treatment is not required for parking lots dedicated solely to parking of employees' private vehicles at commercial and industrial sites. So let's talk about treatment, specifically enhanced versus basic treatment. So as of right now in the ecology manual, these employee-only parking lots only need to implement basic treatment. Basic treatment treats for total suspended solids, or basically it's solids that are found in stormwater. So that could be sediment or litter, different stuff like that. So enhanced treatment is, it treats for that basic treatment, plus it treats for dissolved metals, and specifically copper and zinc. So one thing we know about copper is that copper is known to cause issues with juvenile salmon. So copper sources include both vehicle brakes, and zinc sources include both tire dust and motor oils. So I guess question that we're asking you as well is, should we treat all parking lots the same in Issaquah? And something to note is in the King County manual, they do not allow this exception. So basically, yep, so that's what we're asking for more guidance on. And I see some comments coming in.
Yes, Jamie, has your question been answered? I think we've already gotten to
No, this is a new question.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions. My question was, I just want to make sure I understand so like non-commercial and industrial sites, what is enhanced treatment required for those parking lots? I just want to make sure I understand, like, what is the commercial and industrial site the exception in that they just require basic now and then all other parking lots require enhanced, or what's the current state?
Stacy?
Yes. Well, parking lots, the only thing right now that you have parking lots, it doesn't matter if it's commercial or industrial or whatever, those are enhanced treatment, and single family street or street residentials and streets of certain, it depends on the ADT, on the level of traffic, but those are typically single family is just basic, and commercial multifamily is enhanced treatment. But there's an exemption or an exception written in the ecology manual that gives a break for commercial industrial sites, that if their parking lot is only employees coming in parking, they don't have any customers parking there, then they're allowed to reduce the level down to basic. And that's something that I don't really support that. And the King County manual, it's not, that exception is not in there. So that's what we're asking. That's the difference.
That's why I just wanted to make sure I understood like what saying should we treat all parking lots the same means, and it sounds like it's bringing this commercial industrial sites employee parking up to the standard that any other parking lot that customers would be using. It would be the same standard for those two. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, I think the theory behind it is that if you have employees driving in and then driving in at the beginning of the day and driving out at the end of the day, you're not seeing the turnover that you would for customers that come in for a few hours and leave. And so that's Ecology's reasoning for allowing this exception. But you still have a lot of particles and things that are on that parking lot.
Great. So we have a comment from Don. Don, go ahead, please.
Yeah, you guys asked, should we treat all parking lots the same? Of course. I mean, I don't know where this came from ecology. It's an old remnant that's been around for a while, but you're still getting the same pollutants, you're still getting the same problems, and now with the recent 6 PPD problems we're seeing, yes, enhanced treatment for all parking lots, please.
That's what staff is supporting. We just wanted to make sure.
We have a few more questions. Mathangi, you have a question?
Actually, it was answered by the previous one. I was curious as to why, in a commercial place, like employee alone parking place would have a different treatment than customers coming in. I think Stacy answered that question.
Thank you very much. Tom, you have a question?
Yes, Tom Anderson here. I'm just wondering, so is there any data to support that distinction between the two types? I mean, have measurements been made and we determine, oh yeah, there's only 30% of the contaminants found on these employee-based sites, or was it just kind of a seat of the pants sort of distinction that was arrived at?
Yeah, I have not read any data that supports it. Ecology must have something to support it. And it's not a new exception. It's been in their manual for a while.
Yeah, so we don't have any data that goes one way or the other outside of, we know that parking lots are a pollution generating surface. And so.
Yeah.
So, okay, great. So I guess I'm going to ask the board, do we believe that the city should be treating all parking lots the same? And what I'd like to do is get a thumbs up or thumbs down, or unless you have another way of doing it, but just kind of, it's not a vote, it's just kind of a general feel for the board. So Evan has clearer direction. Does that help you, Evan?
Yeah, and at the very end, we can we can talk about these two as well. But yes, we can do it now too.
Okay, so can I get can you show me your thumbs if you support treating all parking lots the same? And I got to scroll through all of you guys so I can see it all. And it looks like all the participants tonight agree with that comment. So thank you very much.
All right. Okay, and final thing I want to talk about tonight is a new NPDES requirement that's going to be coming to Issaquah, and that's going to be our source control program. But good news is that Issaquah has a long history of successful source control programs aimed at reducing and eliminating non-stormwater discharges into our city-owned stormwater systems and waters of the state. So the existing source control program at the city currently implements that the city currently implements has been above and beyond the NPDES permit requirements. The NPDES permit.
Evan,
Yeah.
NPD. Can you tell me what an
NPDES.
NPDES permit is?
Yeah. So it's a stormwater permit that allows Issaquah to discharge our stormwater to a water of the state, which is a state that is owned by not Issaquah. And ecology facilitates the permit. And so we have certain requirements that we are required to implement.
Thank you, Evan.
Yes, the city will be shifting our existing source control program into a new source control NPDES program. So the source control inspections will be inspecting our existing business sites for pollution and then potential pollution sources. The city will then work with these businesses to eliminate the pollution source through operational BMPs or best management practices, and or structural and treatment BMPs if necessary. So examples of operational best management practices are in like this photo on the right here, a Vector truck coming in, cleaning out catch basins. It could be a sweeper coming and sweeping a parking lot to remove built up debris. And then if this operational BMPs that we're working with this property owner or business owner are not working, then at that point is when we would step up and start working with structural or treatment BMPs, which looking at this photo here on the left, like a dumpster area that has a catch basin near it, getting lots of input. If they are not doing their best effort for operational BMPs, then we would make them cover that dumpster area with a roof, so there would be no rainwater intrusion happening there to allow for any runoff. So the next steps will be finalizing the draft code and then submitting our SEPA. That's really what's left.
And SEPA is?
SEPA is, I do not know the acronym. I cannot.
It's State Environmental Policy Act.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the discussion, we've kind of touched on this a little bit already with should we treat all parking lots the same in Issaquah? But another thing, that we want to touch on as well is should we treat all redevelopment the same? So should we account for new and replace hard surfaces in all redevelopment, regardless if that 50% threshold is triggered?
So are there any comments on that first bullet, set of bullets that Evan just described about treating all redevelopment the same? Any comments or discussion about that?
Evan, my gut instinct says yes, but I know there's a cost associated with it. It's a pretty big price tag, so I'd have to better understand that before I could make a commitment one way or another.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, when we're aware of that as well.
Are there any other, Jamie appears to have a question. Go ahead, Jamie.
I think Tom had a question before me.
Yes,
sorry.
Tom Anderson here. I just wondered, well, so how does that align with the county? Do they make that distinction as well?
I don't know exactly what would be in the King County manual, but I know for the most part that I think we'd be pretty unique to treat all redevelopment the same. So I think for the most part, well, in the ecology manual, it states exactly that if you're below that 50% threshold, that you only have to account for new hard surfaces. And so there's many different jurisdictions that have adopted the ecology manual. And so I can speak to that. But the King County Surface Water Design Manual, we don't have. And so I don't know if that is necessarily in there.
We could look that up, but I think if my recollection is correct, it is in the King County manual also.
It's in there. Yeah, I'm not sure of the latest version, but I know it's in the past versions. It's been in there. The ecology sort of copied it from King County. Actually, that's sort of how it worked a lot of ways. But
I just
Jamie,
wanted to,
go ahead, Stacy.
One of the reasons why I wanted to bring this question up is because where I see it getting used is not on small projects, it's on big projects. big, large, like commercial sites, because the dollar cost of what their improvements on that site are worth are huge. They're really high. So they can do a lot of changes and still fall under that 50% cost, because they have a much higher amount for that 100% to the target amount. Whereas small projects, they can trigger it pretty easily, be above the 50%, because their improvements are on such a smaller scale, versus like residential. That's a much smaller scale than the big projects, so they can hit that 50%. So I actually feel like I see this exemption used more on bigger projects than small projects.
Thanks for that clarification. Jamie, you had a question?
Yeah, and Stacy's answered one of my questions, was just like kind of the city's thinking or the reasoning for suggesting this. One of the things, and I thought this is certainly not my area of strength, but do we have large numbers? So like a large project that Stacy might be seeing, or it doesn't need to be large, but we have standards for levels of impervious surfaces. Those standards have presumably changed over time. Is that fair enough? Or have those standards been fairly consistent?
Are you talking about the level? What do you mean by level? You mean the
Like
amount of square
like
footage?
the level of impervious surface that's acceptable on a given piece of given piece of land.
Well, because that comes under our planning codes, and like people, they're allowed a certain allowable lot coverage, impervious lot coverage, and that can vary. I mean, there's residential areas that have like 50%, but then there's some areas of the city where you can go up to 80 or 90% allowed impervious area. So, and I don't know that those numbers have changed that much over the years.
Okay, I was just curious if there's any tie-in, like with properties that have impervious surfaces well above what the property requirements are, if that's another kind of wrinkle here that should be considered, just in if it's a property that is already out of compliance or grandfathered in, is there anything there that should be considered? And I don't know how that comes together, but that's just a question or a topic that I would just raise.
Yeah, I mean, we have sites that they call them, what is it, non-conforming sites, where maybe they have higher than the allowable lot impervious area. And if they redevelop them, then they are supposed to reduce. We usually ask for them to reduce and make it in compliance, but that's only if they're doing redevelopment. If they're leaving it the same, we don't ask people to reduce the amount of impervious area.
Okay.
And the 50% thing doesn't really come into play for those.
Okay, thank you.
Great. We have a question from Don. Don, go ahead, please.
More of a comment than a question. So I go back to the Target example that we've been talking about. If Target were to replace that entire parking lot, I think the right thing to do would be to ask them to put in treatment at that point, or flow control and treatment if it triggers both, and not just let them replace it in kind under where you're at now. So just something to consider.
And I would totally support that, but that's not kind of the way our current stuff is. Because I think there's that whole pavement section in the current addendum that says that as long as you're not increasing the area and you're changing the pavement, it doesn't count as new impervious.
It feels like a game, right?
Oh, totally.
They can play the game. Yeah.
And that's what we see a lot. We see that every summer when people are out there redoing their parking lots, and as long as they're not expanding them, then it's kind of frustrating, because that's your time to retrofit things, is when they're doing development.
Yeah, when you have it opened up.
Currently, our requirements don't allow that, but I would support adding those to the addendum.
And I think I guess
approve.
my take on it would be, there should be some threshold. I mean, I think repaving your parking lot's one thing, or repairing your parking lot's one thing. But if you're redeveloping your parking lot and turning it into something bigger, it should trigger you doing the right thing, which is the stormwater control. So I think there needs to be some thought of how to put that language together. I may have to talk to the city attorney about how to do it, but I tend to agree with what Don just said, which is if they make that all not parking lot and turn it into some kind of more development, they should be doing something else to make it work. That's my comments. Jamie, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna say basically the same thing. Is I feel like this is pretty complex, and so I don't know that I have like really. I don't feel confident giving you one answer, but it just seems like I think we all seem aligned on the goal. I do think we should avoid. How do we avoid unintended consequences of having terrible shaped parking? Like we don't want, and I don't know what. There's some balance there, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think that's going to be probably a more nuanced look at how we could do this in a way that protects in the situations we want, but doesn't keep doesn't have unintended consequences that none of us might want that might actually be detrimental. So yeah, thank you.
Are there any other comments from the board? Evan, did you get the direction you were looking for from us?
Yes, no, thank you very much. And we have some homework to do and I think we all want the same thing, but we got to figure out how to do it. So, we'll keep working at it and we'll get there.
I just wanted to add one more thing, that this also, if we're looking at this, like the whole thing about not giving a pass for ones if they're replacing impervious with an in-kind material, this comes up a lot on capital projects. And our capital projects like public works or parks or something, they say, hey, it was already impervious before. Why do we have to do something now when we're doing more, impervious for that same footprint? That comes up a lot. So I just want to caution that if we say we want them to do more, that also is going to increase costs in capital projects too, not just private development.
Well, personally, I think it's great if we all do the same thing. If we treat government projects the same way as we ask a commercial developer to do,
Yes.
I think it's the right thing to do. Personally, I think we should all,
I do too.
we walk the talk, or we talk, as they say. Well, I just want to say to all of you, you've been very patient with their questions and comments. You did a very nice job on your presentation, and I want to thank you all for the time you've given to us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to the next agenda item unless there's anything else for the good of the order. I got to get back to it. Sorry. Back to my agenda. So that concludes our agenda items. At this point, we're going to move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is reports. And I'm going to turn it over to Stacy to talk about board schedule and any other reports that she has.
Great, thanks, Nancy. I was just going to pull up the updated schedule. Right, Billy, are you able to see that schedule? Can you give me a thumbs up? Great. All right, so just a couple of notes around our updated schedule. So as you received several notices over the last week, we are planning to return to person in June. That's a month ahead of schedule. So our next meeting will be in person at Tibbetts Manor. We'll be sending out more information ahead of that meeting. Our meetings will continue to be hybrid. The remote option will only be for members of the public or presenting staff, so board members are expected to be there in person. As I mentioned in my email last week, we do recognize that this is quite a transition, and I'll also talk with our new chair and vice chair about possibly having some social time, whether that's at the June meeting or a future meeting where we can get together outside of our scheduled meeting time, either before or after. Just a couple quick updates on our calendar. So today we were also going to give you a preview of performance reporting. We decided to pull that from the agenda today, expecting that we would want to have the whole time for the stormwater code review. And then we are, though, preparing for that presentation in July. Thought that we'd be more prepared to bring you a complete set of draft ICAP performance measures, as well as display what a dashboard might look like at that meeting. For our June meeting, we still are planning to discuss the stormwater and wastewater master plan. I'll be in touch with our public works teams to make sure that we are on track for that and alert you if we do need to adjust that agenda. Also in June, we're going to be having for some of you, a refresher training. For some of you, it'll be a new training on Open Public Meeting Act, public records. As I demonstrated tonight, we will also be having a refresher on Robert's rules, which would have been helpful prior to our vote on the approval of the meeting minutes from previous meetings tonight. Couple other updates. Just wanted to highlight that we are starting to talk about possibly doing a wildlife corridor study. Some internal conversations with potential consultants happening now. I've just put a placeholder for July meeting in case those conversations do progress to a point where we're ready to bring questions as well as scope for feedback from the environmental board. And then as we discussed at our last meeting, we've also added in a discussion on our emergency management plan for August. We're going to do that along with our discussion on the climate vulnerability assessment, which is kicking off tomorrow with our consultant team. And I think those are my updates on the board schedule. I'll just pause here, see if there are any questions about what is coming up over the next couple months.
Stacey, I have a quick question, and that is Connie brought up the issue of the solid waste contract and the discussion that's happening. Can we perhaps add that to the agenda fairly sooner rather than later?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I will check with Public Works team and see if they can provide an update and some discussion at our June meeting, if we're able to fit that in, since they'll be there for the master plan update.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, Nancy, I had another question. I thought that there was mention of one final touch point on Title 18, like all of the code comprehensive. Do we know when that's expected back? I didn't see that. I saw kind of a note that it might be.
Yeah, I am in touch with our planning team about that. Right now, I have some time potentially held in August for an update. That, as you're noting, that is not really the touch point. That is just for an update. So I will talk further with the planning team, see what the expectations are for bringing back the full Title 18 packet.
Okay, thanks, Stacey.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay.
Great. I do have just a couple quick updates, Nancy.
Go ahead.
Great. So just a few updates on climate action plan. As I've spoken to before, I'm committed to bring you updates each month on where we are. So as I mentioned, the climate vulnerability assessment, we have our kickoff meeting with consultants tomorrow. We will be talking to you all about that later on in the summer. We'll also be meeting with the equity board at least twice over the summer to seek their feedback on our approach. Our climate action challenge launched. I invite you all to join if you haven't. We are starting to talk among staff, our electeds and boards about how to better promote the climate action challenge and get folks involved. We will have some additional capacity on this summer to start to do more outreach, both to staff, but also to the community, to businesses, schools, and other various groups. Our heat pump campaign is also getting ready to launch. We have made a decision to switch our approach after talking with the City of Seattle, where instead of working directly with installers, the East Side cities and our nonprofit partner will be working with a distributor. This will help both protect the cities from any issues arise, but also we anticipate result in a better relationship between the installer and the homeowners because the distributor has a little more weight. They're keeping a close eye on those installers and can ask for corrections, improvements to be made if needed. We did hold an event yesterday with folks that were interested in supporting the cities in terms of doing outreach, participating as advisors to this program as it launches. We had about 7 folks from Issaquah participate, which was great. Ann Newcomb was there. as well. So folks are really getting excited about this campaign launching, and you'll see more coming from us in terms of scheduling those workshops probably in the next month or so. We are also still proceeding with our budget request to council. One ask will be to support the low income multifamily heat pump program, and then the other is to support a clean building initiative to work with building owners in the community to meet some state energy efficiency requirements ahead of the timeline for the state compliance. We'll be bringing that budget request to council in late June and early July. And then the last update is our Lead for Cities program. We completed the orientation a couple of weeks ago. Even more excited now about this opportunity to really learn from other cities. It will help us identify some specific policies that we can advance in Issaquah to better meet our greenhouse gas emission targets and our other sustainability goals. We will continue to report back to the board about the progress in the Lead for Cities program, and really do anticipate engaging you further as we start to identify what the policy opportunities might be for meeting the LEED certification, but also for helping us meet our climate action plan targets. Those are all my updates.
Great. Okay, that concludes the report section of the agenda. With that, we'll turn it over to other business or announcements. And does anybody have any other business or announcements that they'd like to share with us all?
Yeah, I have one. I just wanted to really thank Nancy for everything that she's done over the last year. I've gotten to see a lot of it front row and center. I think you guys all see it as well, but it's just incredible the amount of work and how much she really cares. And I just want to thank you. I've learned a ton from her and really appreciate everything she's contributed over the last year to get us to where we are today. So thank you, Nancy.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate that. Thanks, guys. It's been fun. So with that, I don't think we have anything more unless anybody else. With that, thank you all for your time this evening, and I guess most of us will see you in person in June. So best wishes to you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Nancy.
Thank you.
Good night.